latest episode of the South Tip Arts Podcast. Water Witching is an exhibition of new work by artist Shelagh Honan. Her lens-based narrative features photography, sculpture, video, sound and installation, all of which pivot around an audio-video called Aistear. There is much to admire in Shelagh Honan's film installation Aistear. Firstly, the breathtaking cinematography of the work, the stark beauty of the landscape brought to the screen in a way that seduces the senses. Sheilah's exhibition opened here on October the 22nd and will run until November the 27th, 2021. I was delighted to catch up with Shelagh during the installation of Water Witching, where she told me all about her process and how this body of work came to be. Shelagh Honan, it's brilliant to have you here at South Tipperary Art Centre. You're very welcome to the podcast. I've been watching you for the last couple of days install your absolutely stunning work downstairs. This exhibition features a location that's really kind of close to my own heart, and that's where you live, you lucky thing. So I know it was a specific location that sort of captured you for this body of work. So do you want to tell me a little bit about it?
Okay. Thanks, Emer. It's really fabulous to be here in South Tipperary. It's been Art Centre. It's been such a great experience the last few days installing. Really positive and great to have all the support of yourself and Helena and all the technicians. It's been wonderful. So the work, it's a body of work and it's probably been a few years in the making, even though the video work, which is what you're referring to, and the images probably though are, I suppose that's the main body of work, and they emerged really as part of the lockdown, and that certainly was due to the location and down around.
Do you think that came from just exploring your own doorstep in a way that you maybe didn't before?
Not really. Location and landscape is a huge part of my work, and I'm always scouting and I'm always kind of looking for that, and it's kind of difficult to articulate what it is, but for me there's within the video, it's not a completely abstract narrative. There is a storyline to it, and I'm following a progression, and I'm rejecting particular locations in favour of others. So I'm clearly looking for, the right notes. If you think of it almost as a piece of sound, nearly,
I understand.
I think it's a good analogy. So I would have been aware of these locations, and I've shot in this area before. But I think what lockdown made me think about more was the ecology and nature itself. And so the title of the piece is Water Witching, and that comes from the whole notion of dowsing or divining. And
it's a very evocative title, actually. I was just about to ask you, where did you get the title? But
And so the idea was that maybe as part of COVID, this illness, and that we were all terrified with when it first happened in March. And actually I went straight to the Shelagh Peninsula. I think the lockdown, I finished work on the Friday, and I think by the Saturday or the Sunday I was down in the Corca Guiva, which is very close to Dingle, and spent a few months there. But I really was thinking about, this kind of, would you say this kind of virus, and where it came from, and how all our healing comes from. And we've had those conversations, Emer, you and I, and how important nature is, and even the moon, and how it controls lots of different things. So maybe, that connection with nature and the idea of water witching or divining and sensing place and allowing nature to heal in a way. So then the protagonist is this young girl that's moving through the landscape, and what better really at that kind of tender age almost, where there's an innocence or a purity. And so and then kind of exploring that area through this character, and then also the older woman that comes into it, which is very important again, and the knowledge that comes from maybe people who have life experience and connections with areas. So that's kind of how the whole narrative is loosely threaded.
Yes. There's a beautiful section in the film with the whale.
Oh yeah.
Which is just stunning. It's just stunningly shot and everything. It's really lovely. How on earth did you manage to capture that footage?
Well, actually, that was the first piece of the whole film. So I often say, when I'm trying to describe my work, because because it is abstract and there's no like linear narrative, and so it's very difficult to storyboard. So I almost feel like it's like a tune. You find one note and you're sure, and you just keep hitting this note over and over, and then you have to flesh out the rest of the tune.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. So the first note from me was the whale. So I got a call to say there was a dying whale.
So it was like, oh my God, I have to go quick.
Yeah,
I was thinking that, like, I was hoping that might be the way it happened, and it wasn't something that you have some kind of knowledge that none of the rest of us do from your divining, maybe.
Water witching, that would be fab, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's stunning. It's really beautiful. The other thing that's really interesting is you've got a lot of different ways of viewing the work in the one space downstairs. Like the small collection, it's like a little mini installation of all the slide viewers, is really, I don't know, the way that you will move around this space, it's hard to, because it's not completely there yet, it's hard to actually, take that trip around it, but it'll be a very interesting way that you will move through it. Like it's sort of active, it's not just passive. You won't be standing there. Is that part of your overall process?
I think ways of seeing is a huge, and ways of how you can present, I wouldn't say concepts, that's even too lofty, but ways of how you can, new ways of kind of, I'm always exploring how you can visualize work and how the viewer can engage with it, because I'm fascinated with optics. And I suppose my background is sculpture, so I graduated 94 in Limerick College of Art, like yourself. But we were the first year where we had a VHS editing suite that came in. I know, you were younger, Helena.
I was only a baby.
Sorry, Emer, you were only a baby.
Yeah.
So we were the first year where we could actually edit video, and that was so important. And I fell in love with that. But I think that whole sculptural, spatial installation is a huge bedrock on my practice. And I think I'm very fortunate to have that, because in colleges now it's all about kind of opening up departments and allowing students to move through areas. And like we would have always wanted that as students.
Yeah,
and it's
to get a cross collaboration between all that. Yeah, lovely.
But having said that though, I feel so lucky to have had a solid grounding in sculpture and yet have been able to move through media.
Yeah.
So
I think a lot of sculptors are probably drawn to film as a medium, even just because of the whole, the performance aspect of sculpture, and then like how do you kind of capture that, or how do you keep it, or how do you kind of, film kind of becomes an integral part of, and photography, a lot of what sculptors do. So I suppose it's kind of a natural thing, really, isn't it?
It is, and it's hard. I think some people find that very difficult to understand, because when I would say to people, what do you do? No, I'm studying sculpture, they think of carvings. I never carved anything in my life.
It's gas, isn't it? Yeah. And it's funny because I talked to you about this already, but when I went into sculpture in Limerick, I had a very traditional idea in my head of what I should be doing, and it kind of broke my brain a little bit that at the time, like, it shifted which was brilliant looking back on it, but at the time, like, I was very resistant to, I want to do what I want to do. I wasn't open enough to it when I was younger, but I really see it now as, time goes on and your ideas develop yourself. And I kind of ended up going towards that direction a little bit myself, not properly.
Oh, well,
but
you certainly have. You're working in sound in lots of areas as well.
And sound, like you said there, is very sculptural as well, because that making a soundscape is it's like making a sculpture with sound, isn't it?
It is really. Yeah.
The other gorgeous thing are, I don't even know what you call those viewers of the very old
stereoscopic viewers.
That was the name in my head, but I wasn't sure.
It's a lovely ring to it, isn't it?
Has a lovely ring to it. Yeah, they're fabulous.
Yeah.
Now they're of a different location entirely, so they're a very grand sort of asylum-looking building, or it popped into my head that it might be the Good Shepherd Convent in Limerick, but it isn't, as you told me. But it really has all the connotations of a place like that. What inspired you about that location?
Well, I suppose that work came together. So just to describe what stereoscopic viewers are, they're kind of Victorian postcard viewing devices, and they're these beautiful, so one of them downstairs is an ebony carved inlaid little Victorian box that opens and closes, and it has 3 magnifying glasses on it, and they would have, so it was the first 3D viewing device. So they would have
which would have been imagine
incredible.
To be a Victoria, like,
yeah,
and actually look at this. It must have been like,
yeah,
you know, the stories they tell about the Lumiere film and the people
yeah,
all running out of the cinema because they thought the train was going to come out and land on them. It's that kind of, there's kind of a magic to it, isn't there?
Yeah, and that's what I love about it. So I wasn't really interested in recreating this. So how they worked was you had, so if you photographed a scene, then you moved your camera just a fraction away and you photographed the very same thing. So there was only a slight shift in the distance. Then you printed the two images onto one card, you put them on the card, you look through the magnifying and you see the image three-dimensional. Yeah. But I somehow I wasn't kind of interested in that. I was more interested, I love optics and playing with optics and hacking it and trying to see what I could do. And I guess, like when I was talking about the video there, my work is all really a response to place. And sometimes it's an emotional response to place. And sometimes places, and particularly tragic places, hold emotions within them.
Totally, energy,
So that piece is called Asylum. So it's the old asylum hospital in the grounds of Ennis. So it's Our Lady's Mental Hospital. And it's this really imposing, stunning stone building. So I was actually working on a documentary about 1916 with somebody else. And so we decided to do an interview there because we were trying to match the locations from this building in Dublin. And I noticed somebody going into the building and they had cameras and tripods, so I ran after them and they thought I was kind of going to say, no, you can't do that. So I said, how do you get in? So they told me how to get into the building, and I had somebody with me, Joe was with me, and we did some filming in the building, but it's just haunting, you know. I mean, these tiny little cells downstairs, and they were padded cells, and like we all know, I mean, they were in every town in Ireland. They all have a very particular look to them, don't they? And I think of women in particular, and I know there was a lot of men incarcerated in these places, and you know, maybe women who might have suffered from postnatal depression, or maybe it had something to do with legacy and land.
Yeah, well, you know, my mum was a psychiatric nurse, so she has many stories.
Oh, really?
Of people that were just abandoned to their care, like nobody wanted them.
Yeah, but I thought then what was kind of interesting was, so I printed those images onto glass and I layered them, so that now the 3D is different to the double postcard thing, but it's kind of like an echo, a layer upon a layer. So you're kind of seeing these almost like ghostly corridors. I don't mean ghost as in a ghost, but like an image that has kind of an echo and an echo. And so so these were Victorian institutions, and so you're looking at these Victorian institutions through a Victorian optical viewing device. Then they inspired the other work, the much taller glass works downstairs.
Yeah, they're very interesting now.
Yeah, so it was, how could I take that further then? So then I had kind of figured out that I was working with glass. So like, I think process is so important in making work and the ideas, and so it's kind of one thing begets another and another, and there's a lot of serendipitous accidents, and you follow those leads, and that's the joy of it.
That is the joy of it, and it's, I suppose, to flip that around in the same way, there's a lot of things that, you know, you go down a rabbit hole and it doesn't work, but that's also part of the fun, isn't it? Because you always come away having learned something.
Yeah. And actually, just, I mean, with those stereoscopic viewers, I remember being so excited. I got a present of the first one and I bought the second one, and I was so sure I was going to make something beautiful with them, but they just evaded me for so long. I was printing kind of negatives instead of glass, and they were nice, but they just weren't quite. They evaded me for years until I finally. So sometimes you just have to be patient with things as well.
And just keep going back to it and trying it again.
It comes in its own time.
And stepping away from it, like we've kind of, I've seen you do a few times in the last few days, to just, like I need to just stop looking at this now and go away for a little while and come back and look at it with a fresh take, and then I'll know if it's right or wrong. That's really,
you know, where that really comes from as well. Our former tutor, Tom Fitzgerald, who's head of sculpture in Limerick. Actually, there's a lovely article on him in the Irish Arts Review this month. But I always remember Tom, you know, kind of saying, you know, it's better off having a few different things on the go and walk away from it.
Yeah.
And then when you're kind of figuring out something else, you might say, I could do that with that.
Yeah,
But, you know, so the connections come.
the connections come, yeah.
So,
And just to finish up, you mentioned to me yesterday one of the images in particular could actually, what's the word, inspire you for,
oh, yeah.
you know, a long time to come. Like you can almost see a whole nother pile of work coming out of just this one thing, which is exactly what you just said there.
Yeah.
So, what's coming next?
Well, it's funny you say that because I had a lovely swim this morning, and sometimes I swim a lot. I'm a daily swimmer, and sometimes I find it's great for thinking through ideas. And I was thinking exactly of that piece. So it's an old cassette tape on sitting on the elbow of a chair. And in the other image, you see this kind of almost, you know, it's hard to place what era, but this girl with a very pale face.
Yeah.
And she's left the chair in the second image. So we should, I suppose, say they're large prints that are printed on lovely Hahnemuhl paper. They're about 44 inches wide, framed. And so she's sitting in the chair, and then in the other image, she's left the chair, but we have this spooling audio cassette on the floor. So it's, and even with the slide viewers that you said, these are these kind of obsolete technologies, and almost the ghost in the machine as well. And maybe that kind of always thinking about ourselves and our presence and what do we leave behind, or what echoes do we have. And I'm very nervous about talking about new ideas.
I know, you don't want to, obviously.
I feel they're like little butterflies. And sometimes I feel if you talk about them, it's like they escape you. Yeah. But definitely I am working on an idea
that's great.
In relation to that work.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, sure, maybe this time next year you'll be back again.
Yeah, wouldn't it be great? Yeah.
Thanks so much for taking the time out now, because I know you're busy, in sitting down having a chat with me today, and best of luck with the show.
Thanks, Emer. It's a pleasure working with you all.
And thanks again to Shelagh for taking the time out from her installation to have a chat with me about water witching. Don't forget that as part of Halloween in Clonmel, the Spook Trail happens all this week, so if you've got any little ones at home and are looking for something fun to do, you can download the map from Halloween in Clonmel on Facebook. And don't forget to come and have a look at our fantastic display created by our art tutor here, Mags Rudnicka. We have a myriad of spooky visitors hanging out on our balcony waiting to welcome you. If you missed our TY radio play, The Woman, which was aired on Pure Radio on Monday night at 7 p.m. So if you missed that, keep an ear out. We will share it this weekend through our podcast channel, and you can have a listen to the fantastic work of the TY class of 2021 from Presentation Secondary School in Clonmel. Well, that's it for this episode of the South Tip Arts podcast. As I said, water witching is open until the 27th of November. The gallery is open from 10 to 5 p.m, Monday to Saturday. We'd love to welcome you. If you'd like to contact the podcast, the email address is southtip.artspodcast@gmail.com. That's southtip.artspodcast@gmail.com. Talk to you all next time.